So good morning, good afternoon. My name is Matthias Hilarius. I'm the Data Protection Officer and Head of Data Protection and Privacy at SAP. And together with me, I have Howard Kerr. Howard Kerr is the CEO of the British Standards Institution, a company that we've been working with for many, many years. That's helped us very recently to audit and also certify our processes to make sure we would meet a British standard. And that British standard is the first standard in the world, as far as I understand,
yes,
that implements the requirements of GDPR. So this was one of our crowning moments to achieve GDPR compliance for us. So Howard, thank you for coming here at Sapphire, and maybe you want to say a couple of words.
So I remember visiting the SAP offices in Germany very early on in my time in BSI. I think it must have been 2009 at that point, because SAP had just been certified to the then version of the British standard, the 10012 standard. And I was very pleased to hand over the certificate and discuss with your colleagues. I probably hadn't appreciated at that time quite how significant that meeting was and how significant the fact that SAP had been certified was. SAP really was a first mover. That was a standard which was published in 2009. I think within months SAP had put themselves forward for audit, and as a result of that BSI was pleased to certify them. The standard that was revised last year is the same standard. It's actually been updated, recognising that GDPR requirements had raised the bar of requirements, and therefore the standard had to reflect that. And again, moving very, very quickly, SAP were the first global certificate that we issued against the 2017 version of the standard, which incorporated the requirements of GDPR as well. So I now appreciate that actually SAP not just, of course, takes this issue incredibly seriously, but actually is very, very proactive and wants to engage with third parties to get that third party evidence that whilst you may believe that you meet the requirements of the standard, you're actually very happy to have a robust third party to come in and verify whether that is the case. And that actually, from a BSI perspective, is almost a model approach and a model customer. Somebody who voluntarily adopts a standard, not because they necessarily have to, but because they want to, because they see that doing the right thing and adopting the best practice is the right thing to do for their business. So in that respect, I think we're very pleased to continue to work with SAP, and of course the journey continues.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And the one thing that I like about that is particularly that we not only have someone who makes me sleep better at night, actually, because we have someone else to look at what we do, and we don't miss anything that otherwise we would probably have never seen, and you can help us detect and improve. So that really indeed is something that is very helpful. So Howard, what do you think? What's the general trend in the market? Do you see many companies following that example right now? Is it just the bigger companies, or do you also see smaller companies following that trend?
Certainly GDPR has triggered a lot more interest in the standard. Obviously, at the moment we have just under 200 organizations that we have certified or we are in the process of certifying. And that's across a variety of geographies, mainly in Asia Pacific and in Europe, less so here in the Americas where we are today. But there is certainly an increase. We see this through our training business. A lot of people are now wanting training on understanding what the standard is and what it can do and how to start preparing our organization for it. So if training is any sort of indicator, I think there's going to be an enormous pickup in interest in the adoption of the standard. It's not mandated or regulated by anybody, which often drives demand. Actually, this is going to be bottom-up demand from organizations. And we're seeing, to your question, certainly based on the UK clients that I've met, relatively small cloud services companies, for example, up to multinational oil and gas and energy companies, to global professional services companies, to local government departments in the UK as well. So I think the standard is relevant to all types of organisations at all levels of maturity. one thing they all have in common, of course, is a desire to get data protection and privacy absolutely right and put it at the heart of their business, and that's the common thread that runs through all of those clients.
Now, I'm the DPO for one company. You look into many companies, and I assume also you got many customers or new customers, prospects approaching you and say, "Hey, I need to get this done." So, what's your advice? What's the journey look like if they come to you and say, "Hey, I want to make sure my company is GDPR compliant. How can you help me?"
So, what we see in a lot of companies, including in my own company when we start on this journey. And I know, Matthias, you are a lawyer by background as well. It's often said, "Oh, GDPR, it's a legal requirement, therefore it sits within the scope of the legal team." And very quickly we found out, and I think a lot of other clients find out, that actually this is not purely a legal issue. Ultimately, it is a legal issue, but actually how you prepare your organisation for this is a whole company methodology. And it's not equally. It's not just about IT. It's absolutely not just about IT. This is about preparing the whole organisation. And if there's one thing that I've learned in the last couple of years, as we've prepared our own company for GDPR compliance and talking to the customers who have, is actually that the legal framework and the IT infrastructure to support this is relatively easy. You just have to work through it systematically. It's actually preparing the human organisation, it's preparing your people, communications, awareness, training, reinforcement, to make sure that people don't just understand the words of the company policy on data protection and privacy, but actually they understand the requirements and the behaviours that they do. Like any legislation, it will take time. People have to feel their way, and obviously through the courts, when this is tested in the courts, there will be evidence of what good will look like. But I think, given the importance of data, nobody is questioning whether this is a good thing or a necessary thing for the business. I think that is now a fundamental truth, and what we would always look for would be senior management leadership at the highest possible level, ideally at the board, to say that data actually is a critical asset, and actually data governance is fundamental to our brand and our reputation, and therefore the whole organisation has to get behind that. That's what we would look for in an organisation. We see it in some organisations. Many organisations, I think, are not yet at that level of maturity.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that SAP has recognized that data protection and privacy are board level topics, that this is a high priority. So I'm in literally every board meeting, sometimes also in the supervisory board meetings, giving updates about the status of our own implementation. And also, of course, they want to know how it works out in practice, what the incidents are, what comes up, how we are going to address it. It's something that we feel very much that also our customers have a high interest, because we are ultimately the ones who are processing their data. So it's not only our own data, but also the data of our customers that they are processing. And you mentioned that absolutely right. We have a not only a legal approach to that. You need a combined approach, and that's why I'm very proud that our data protection privacy team, which I have the honor to head, is composed of lawyers, but we also have by far more people with a technical background now, audit backgrounds, a business background, and it's just the combination of that, of the central team, that allows us then to reach out into the entire company to make sure that the requirements are understood really in the very last corner of the company, and that it's a task for everyone to actually do. That's what we do, and that's also how we work then with you for the certification. So that's actually a very true thing. So if you look at GDPR right now, how has this changed your own organization? If you talk about yourself as a company.
Very good question. I think it's forced us to, for the first time, realize the importance of data. We realized that we did not have strong enough data governance. We realized that probably the quality of our data and our databases wasn't of the standard. I think that's not unusual for most companies. I think a lot of people who haven't consciously managed data. So that's certainly been a wake-up call for our company. And we now have a data governance group which is looking across the whole business. One thing we realized that our data was incredibly siloed, and we had different responsibilities, and it never really came together in one place. We didn't have an overview of data, which clearly is potentially quite risky. And also we didn't have any prioritization of risk around data. I think only by systematically doing an audit and inventory of our data assets did we actually realize that, of course, not all data is the same, not just in scale, but actually in profile and application, and therefore in risk. So we now have a very clear risk register around data, where we have high, medium, and low risk data. We have accountable people now responsible for the different asset classes of data. And these are put into people's job descriptions, and they're reported on through KPIs, just like any other metric of the business. We didn't used to do that as a business, if I'm honest.
This brought you certainly, this was an important first step for you to actually become compliant yourself and to ensure that. But apart from GDPR compliance, has this also helped your business in other ways?
Yeah, I mean, as a company, we also are not just promoting our standard, but we also provide training and consultancy services to GDPR. So obviously, to be credible with our customers, if we are providing these services to our clients, we have to make sure that our own house is in order. So that's a fundamental, fundamental issue. And our board requires us to do it anyway, but I think it becomes a key part of our go-to-market proposition. And this is the point I always make, Matthias, about GDPR is not to see this as a risk mitigation exercise alone. Of course, there are risks that have to be managed, but actually done well, you can actually turn GDPR compliance into a positive, proactive messaging to the market, to your supply chain partners, to your customers, to your regulators, to say, we're a trusted company, we take this seriously,
absolutely.
Your data is secure with us, work with us, and I think that will bring commercial benefits. So it's probably too early to say at the moment whether we can hand on heart say that our business has benefited from it. But I do see enormous opportunities if you get GDPR right, and you can demonstrate a clear differentiation in compliance to perhaps some of your immediate competitors. I think then the trust that will develop will bring commercial benefits, certainly.
Yeah, sure.
And also, and a point I make very clearly in my communications to our employees is, it's about doing the right thing for your employees. A very important part of GDPR is protecting our employees, making sure they're aware of risks, that they're trained, they know what to do, and they're supported through this process, because we don't want our employees unconsciously to do the wrong thing, which might obviously be bad for the business, but also might put them in a difficult personal situation as well. So I think by showing that you are genuinely supportive and caring of your employees, that also, I'm sure, will drive business performance as well.
Oh yeah, and also, I mean, if they understand that you also care about their own data, which you also need to process in order to run your business at some point. Yeah. So it almost sounds like, if you put it into a picture, like a spring cleanup that you did in the house, and now everyone feels better. The people living in there, as well as the people visiting it.
Also, I think we realize that data is really important. The cliche everyone is saying, data is the new oil. I think we realize that data is an asset that should not be sleeping low down in the organization. Actually, if you elevate data and make it a strategic issue, not just from a risk management, but also from a business go-to-market proposition, I think it just opens your mind, I think, to many more possibilities. That data is not passive, data needs to be active, and if you harness the power of data and enhance data where you can, and I think if you are a GD compliant organization, why should you not be able to attract and retain more data?
Yeah, I mean,
from business
very
partners,
clear.
from various sources, not just your own internal data that you generate. Why would you not be trusted? Would your clients and business partners be happy to give you even more data in future?
That's exactly
to enrich your data, but also to give more value to them.
That's exactly the point. If you say we're living in a data economy, which we clearly do, we all have come to love the services that we can use on our cell phones, in the cloud, on the internet, that make our lives so much easier. We do it in connected cars and so on, but all that requires data. Data that relates to the users, and that also provides them, based on this data, then a service that is useful to them. And very clearly, if we need more data, we will only get it if we can create a sense of trust in people, that they like giving you the data, and if then that's the competitive advantages I see it. If you have the choice in the market between someone where you don't really exactly know what they do with the data, for what purposes they're going to use it, might they use it for something else which they never tell you, those kinds of things. If that if that's the one notion, and the other one is you really got someone who does the job right. To whom would you want to give the data? Of course, to the person who does the job right and gives you a good feeling and say, hey, we are using it in the right way.
And the question then, which we've discussed earlier, is how do you actually demonstrate compliance? It's one thing for a company like SAP or BSI to say that you can trust us with your data. That's an easy claim for us to make, but how does the counterparty believe that? How do they evidence that case?
That's why we need you.
That's where the certification comes in. That's where the independent third-party certification by a competent, trusted party who then issues ultimately there is a certificate, but it's evidence of having done a robust audit of internal processes and policies and procedures through the management system, and then SAP in your case can then show that to the customers and say, here's the evidence that we comply. And to be clear, the certificate is not we always make this clear, a certificate is valid at the time that it's issued, but there's an expectation because obviously we do through continuous surveillance, continue to monitor compliance with an organization on an annual and a 3-yearly basis. And that certificate has to be re-earned. And one thing we always look for in the recertification exercise is not just that you are in the same position as you were perhaps 3 years ago. We look for evidence of continuous improvement.
Of course. We
look for an organization that is continuously looking at ways of improving, that learns from previous audits. We always make observations, point out some non-conformities. We look for evidence the organization has addressed that and potentially adopted new and better processes as well. That spirit of continuous improvement is fundamental to the certification process. So
ultimately it comes down that you say there need to be 2 components. It has to be, you need a very strong internal data protection team that actually drives it in a company. And then you need a good and credible external party that certifies those efforts, that everyone can look at that. But ultimately it all comes down that data protection privacy is part of the DNA of a company, and only if you live it and people can see it and can feel it that you do it, and you can attest it. It's the one thing that makes it credible outside to the outside world in the market, and also beyond the market to the regulators as well. So that's the one big advantage that I see out of what we are doing here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think we are very proud that we've received again for many years now our certification. I will not hide that we've always had a couple of findings by your company, but that we are working on improving them. So SAP may not be perfect, but it's our aspiration to become perfect at some point in time. And it's with your help and your certification, which we got. We are very proud of that. So Howard, thank you for that.
Good.
And thank you also for your time today.
And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you, thanks.
Thank you.